This has been a really interesting thing in my career. I've kind of worked between both established NGOs and new online organizations. And what's interesting is that the new online organizations, they spring up out of nowhere, and overnight, from an internet petition, they can have millions of members. They can be raising millions or tens of millions of dollars a year, and often they're seizing opportunities, they're seizing these moments in history that the old established NGOs are not able to jump onto and get new members from and raise money from. And this is a real shame, actually, because the established NGOs are often the ones with the real capacity to work on these issues. So there was a case a long time ago when I was doing some consulting with a human rights organization, and there were three prisoners in the U.S. Prison facility that's in a military base in Cuba called Guantanamo Bay. Three prisoners killed themselves, kind of in protest, and and this would have been an amazing moment for this human rights organization to run a campaign, to start a campaign, a new campaign to close Guantanamo Bay, which was one of their goals. But it took weeks for them to get everything cleared through legal and get the communications department signed on. And by the time they were ready to approve something like that, it was the moment was over. Meanwhile, a whole bunch of new online organizations had acted and had put up petitions and had gained hundreds of thousands of new members from campaigning on that organization. But campaigning on that issue in that moment. But which organizations were best suited to actually negotiate with the government and put pressure on the government and close Guantanamo Bay? It was the established NGOs. It was not the new online organizations. So there's this asymmetry, and it doesn't always go that way. We had a great example in the United States after Trump's election, when the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union, which is a very old, more than 100 years old, established organization that protects our constitutional rights in America. The ACLU ran a campaign immediately when Trump was elected. It said the memes, that they were sharing on social media said, "See you in court," this image stamped over Donald Trump's face. And lots of people got excited about that. And ACLU raised millions and millions of dollars. I think in the end it was over $70 million that they raised in just a few weeks right after the election. A huge amount of money for them. And what was really great is that the ACLU responded to that, not just by saying, okay, we're going to keep doing what we've always been doing, which is really great work, but they said, okay, we're actually going to start building a new kind of organization within the ACLU. They call it People Power, and they're using online tools and online campaigning techniques to organize a huge number of new members in new ways all over the country on the ground. So that was a really exciting thing to see. And I think, looking at that case, it's clear that the way the ACLU was able to seize that moment is that their executive director, their top leader, really pushed that. I think it's very hard for somebody running a digital department or running a communications department alone to act fast and jump on really big opportunities. There needs to be support from the top. And they had that, and they were really, really rewarded for that, and we're all better off because of it. Well, yeah, another aspect of this difference between the new online organizations and established membership organizations and civil society organizations is that the established organizations usually have a much deeper relationship with their membership, and being a member of an older traditional civil society organization usually means so much more than being a member of an online organization. And to give one example, when I worked with I worked with one of the very early online organizations, and at the time we had something like 3 million members, and we had a meeting with a labor union who also had 3 million members. But our members were email addresses. And this labor union's members, of course, they gave about 2% of their salaries to the union. The union had offices in every single community all across the country. It was a big public sector union. The union mobilized huge numbers of people to work on election campaigns and to get involved in local issues. And of course, all of these workers, as represented by their union, were, not a policy that may influence them abstractly, but they were working together with their union to win raises, win respect on the job, win safety regulations, control over their schedules, over things that really impact their lives and their families' lives in a really deep way. That's what that union was doing. But our online organization, we simply collected people's email addresses and then asked them for money and asked them to sign more petitions. And of course, sometimes we asked them to come out to a protest or something like that, but the relationship was so much thinner, right? But here's what's ironic, is that during that year, we were really getting a lot of attention because we were running these flashy campaigns that were connecting with the news cycle. So when this was when the Iraq War was about to start. This is kind of ancient history here, sorry, but when the Iraq War was about to start, and so this was an issue that we were really helping to lead on. And so we were getting into the news, we were getting on TV. If you did a news search, you would have seen for that year, you'd see lots of articles about us, and you'd see very few articles about the union that I was just talking about. Does that matter for the union? Well, I think it matters for the union and it matters for our society, because we need the kind of leadership that only that union and other unions and other established civil society organizations we need their leadership because they're so powerful, right? Because they really have that deeper relationship with so many more people. So just imagine if that union, if our biggest public sector union had come out really strong, just as strongly as we did, and gotten into the news cycle, gotten on TV. Well, imagine if their leader was fighting to get on TV the way we were, to make really strong points about how we should not go to war in Iraq, and raise questions and challenge the Republicans and the Democrats who were supporting the war in Iraq. If that union and if other big, strong civil society organizations had really jumped into the fray and led the way we were trying to do, then I bet the Iraq War would not have happened. So it's and here's the other thing, is that if those unions had done that, people would know who those unions are. Their own members often don't know who they are. Their members would know who they are if they would lead on timely issues like this. Their members would know who they are, and they would attract more new members. They would have more clout in their bargaining power. So it's really a shame. I think that I don't want to be negative though, because I think every union, every civil society organization, every old human rights organization is able to lead like that. It's just I know it's hard because there's bureaucracy, there's a lot of stakeholders, but that's the fight. I think that's the struggle before us, and I think that a lot hangs in the balance, on this question of whether established organizations will be able to lead in a really public, opportunistic. It sounds like a bad word, but to lead in a public, opportunistic, aggressive way. I think that there's a lot that old established organizations can learn from these new internet organizations that are just popping up all the time. And I think that it's not just a matter of sort of abstract learning lessons, but I think I think what really needs to happen in a lot of organizations is to basically create a unit within the established organization, within the civil society organization, that is free to behave as if it was one of these new startup internet organizations. And so, so have it, every big civil society organization has some kind of a digital team, but that team is not necessarily empowered to launch a campaign, put an internet petition up, and run with it, or do whatever kind of campaign it would want to do. Things have to go through approval processes and be discussed by all the different leaders in the organization. So I think that a radical thing and a really positive thing that an organization could do is to create a new unit, or maybe just take their own digital unit and give it more autonomy. And I know this is scary for a lot of people that have to think about this stuff. Now, the only way it would work is if the person leading that digital unit, that campaign, maybe it shouldn't even be called a digital unit, but it should be called a campaigning unit. The person leading that unit needs to be, a senior person with experience and with good judgment, and who has the trust of the executive director or the president of the organization. So they need to know the parameters in which they're able to operate. But that example I gave earlier about when prisoners killed themselves at Guantanamo Bay, it would have been amazing if there was a unit inside that human rights organization that could have launched a petition right away. Now but in order to do that, they would need to be people who were in the loop, who were informed about the stance of, or the status of the negotiations between the organization and the government over Guantanamo Bay, and would really need to be not just some inexperienced person who knows how to send out emails and knows how to launch internet petitions. It would really have to be a leader in the human rights field running that campaigning organization within the older human rights organization. So I think that would be a model, and it's not so much about just learning from these organizations, because the new internet organizations, it's not that they're so smart. Like when I was getting in the news all the time with this internet organization that I was talking about earlier, it wasn't because I was so great with the media, or it wasn't because our organization was doing such incredible work. It was just because we were jumping in because of our structure, because we were so unencumbered. It was in the nature of our organization that we could jump into the news cycle and capture this attention, right? So what could internet organizations, what could these new online organizations learn from established organizations? Well, I think that those new organizations should really go get into alliances, and more than they do today. Sometimes it happens, but more than they do today. They should get into alliances with the more established organizations and work together on campaigns. So, for example, instead of just in that example I gave earlier around Guantanamo Bay, the internet organizations that did launch petitions around that, maybe what would have been really great is if they had contacted the established human rights organization and said, we're going to launch this petition, but we would like to do it in a joint campaign with you, where everybody who signs up on our petition is also becoming a part of your organization and is joining your list. Now, that may seem like kind of crazy and altruistic for the online organization, like they're giving something away to this older organization. But actually, I think that the online organizations in that case would have gained a lot more people would have come and signed their petitions and joined their campaigns if they had been able to work. If they've been able to offer the credibility and the status of that older organization. So I think there's a lot to learn in both directions for all of us.